It is Sunday night. That must mean it's time to talk some fantasy baseball. The Reds are on fire. Jeff Erickson is not here, but we have a special guest wearing a Reds hat. Find out who that is and everything else going on in the baseball world all coming up next on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Happy Sunday night, everybody. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. I'm Scott Jenstad, usually joined by Jeff Erickson. Special guest this week, Toby, Batflip Casey, has agreed to join us. So looking forward to that. If you could please rate or review the podcast, that goes a long way towards helping us out, help people find the podcast, all that good stuff too. Toby, how are you? I appreciate you jumping on. I know that everybody's gonna be happy to have you here. One of the nicer guys that plays fantasy, one of the better fantasy players, and one of the smarter fantasy players. So I'm looking forward to learning from you today.
Yeah, well, thanks Scott for having me here. Happy Father's Day to you and to all the dads out there. And I must say that was a very professional intro, finding a way to incorporate Jeff being out and the Reds hat into the equation. So it's
pretty rare. It's pretty rare, but every once in a while I nail one. It's like 1 in 20. Usually I fumble over my words and freak out, but happy Father's Day back at you too. I appreciate you jumping on. I know there's a lot going on, so that's it's even more good stuff there. I wanted to jump in by kind of switch it up a little. I want to talk about one of your teams here. I know that I didn't have you on because you're doing so well this year, but as I flip on here on the RotoWire Online Championship on the NFBC site, that's essentially the 12-team contest, but it's a massive contest. There are, try to scroll all the way down there, 2,500 teams in that contest. It's a huge contest, $350 entry with a huge grand prize. What's the grand prize in that? Like 150? When is 150?
Yeah.
You are second overall right now. I had a big day today, gained about 500 points on Doug Roth, who we do know he hangs out in Vegas at the drafts. But how are you feeling about this team? It's June 18th. I usually like if it's April or May, I'm like, standings don't matter. They matter at this point. We're, what are we, 40-something% way through the season. How are you feeling about this team? I know you mentioned off air that you lost DeGrom on this team. Pretty awesome that you're up here. But how you feeling about the squad that's in second overall? Feeling pretty good?
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about the team. I mean, it's early, like you mentioned. We still have, a little over 3 months to go in the season. So there's a lot that can happen. I did lose DeGrom. I was really hoping that he would somehow come back. And even if I could get 40 to 60 innings out of him, I was really looking forward to that. So that's been a little bit of a bummer. We've got some injuries that are hitting the squad a bit, but I'm really excited to be up at the top. I mean, I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't excited to be there. So it's just a matter of trying to maintain and, focusing on winning the league for sure, but also focusing on how do I improve my team and looking at kind of where I am in the categories and how I can improve from here on out so that I have a little time.
Yeah, I was going to say, what point of the year do you start to really focus on, this is a team that has a chance for the overall. You're looking at overall stats yet. I think for me last year, I think everybody knows I've talked about a bunch. I finished pretty high in the main event. It was up there for most of the summer. Most of the summer, I think it was about this time of year where I really started to look at overall. Like, where am I failing here? Because you always want to win your league. But, you get to this point, a lot of the money goes in the overall. You get to the point in the season midway through here where you're way up there in the overall. I think you got to focus on a little bit here.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people talk about it, and they're like, you got to win your league first. And I would say absolutely not. I have been focused on the overall for this team for the last month and a half or so.
Okay.
It was the number 1 overall team for pretty much the first maybe 4 to 6 weeks of the season, something like that. It was pretty steady at number 1. And obviously, you have to win your original league. But when you look at the league prizes, especially in the OC versus the overall prizes, the overall prize is really what you have to be shooting for. And it's been a really interesting team because it's really strong in, it's been a team that's been strong in kind of 9 categories throughout the season. And at first I was really down on saves. The ratios have always been elite. Okay. I was down at saves, so I added a couple closers. I got really lucky. I was going to drop Estevez, and then Quintana blew up, for 4 runs. And I was like, I'll hold him out one other week. And then he became gold. Sewell I have as well. And he only got the job, at least the full-time job, because of injuries to Munoz. And so that's really I've been really lucky, but I've kind of had these different categories that I focused on. I had, I think 3 home runs in 1 week, a couple weeks back, and I dropped like 1,000 points in home runs. So now I'm just focused on home runs, so it kind of fluctuates week to week, but really I am focused on the overall and trying to do as well as I can there for sure.
Yeah, I think in this point of the season, you have to be, and you probably started looking overall a little bit earlier than I would have, but I would have, mid-May if you're up there. I think last year I made a big run. Like, I think it was like the second week of May, and I went from like, 100th to like the top 10. I'm like, all right, I got to start looking at this. Look at your team. You mentioned saves. I see you have Ryan Helsley and Liam Hendriks. Did you hold on to those guys? How are you dealing with those guys? We'll kind of jump into some news and notes here. Obviously, Helsley and Hendriks both won the IL this week.
Yeah, I did end up holding on to them just because I'm a little suspect. Like Estevez has been really solid throughout, but Sewell blew a save the other day. He's been fantastic, but with Munoz coming back and just looking lights out, you never know when they're going to kind of make that switch. They've got so many bullpen arms. And so I had Hendriks, who was injured last week. I picked him up pretty early on and kind of held on to him. For him, I was considering dropping him, but I felt like, I'm down to, after this week, I think I have like $85 left in that league. I got Ellie De La Cruz last week, hence the Reds hat. I've got him, Matty McLean, and Jonathan India on this team. So I really love, I'm really for the Reds right now.
I was saying, if you bought the Reds hat, you should buy the Red hats.
So I don't know how.
I was going to say, did you buy the Reds hat because of that, or did you already have it?
No, I already had it. I went, I go on a trip with some of my buddies from college every year to different stadiums, and we went to the Red stadiums, and I always try to get the hat when I go there. So I got that. I do like the Reds. I love that stadium. I mean, that stadium, if you haven't been there before, it's just a real, it's just a gem. So, so I held on to them. Helsley, it seems like it's not hugely serious. I think they've done 2 MRIs. They're waiting on the second one, but it seemed like they were shutting him down for 10 days and then going to go from there. So I'm going to hold on to him and kind of see how it plays out. I did go after Hicks, but not super aggressively, at least in that OC league. So I decided to hold on to them, but we'll see what happens. If I picked up McGuff this week, I got him for $9, which I was really pleased about. I like him a lot just as a pitcher. I like that Arizona situation as well. I've picked him up on a few other teams as well the last couple weeks. And so I'm hoping that works out. And so if my saves start to solidify and I don't need them as much, I'm really hoping to kind of bank those. And then towards the back end of the season, maybe be able to take advantage of, some of those situations where people pay attention a little bit less. And maybe you can go after some of those 2-step starters and rack up some innings with the ratios already solidified. So, yeah.
That's a good plan. I think that it's key to know. Like, I think it's good to know when you have that one category you really need an overall, because you can really focus on that for a while. And like you said, if you build up a bunch of saves, that's fine. You can always kind of change your strategy last month of the year. But people are excited you're here. I got a couple of questions for you. First of all, good human Rob DiPietro says hi to you. He's excited that you're here in all caps. You got a little Rob DiPietro.
Gotta love Rob.
Let's see some questions here for you. You prefer Royce Lewis or Luis Matos, new Giants outfielder? We'll be talking about him when we talk about FAAB in a little bit. I'd go Royce Lewis with this combo.
Yeah, I'd go Royce Lewis too. He's got the multi-position eligibility with shortstop and third base, so he covers a lot of. He has that roster flexibility. I'm not sure like how long-term Matos is. When you look at his projection, it's pretty high for his batting average, but there's not a lot of power and not a ton of speed there. You never know when people will kind of outrank their projections, but Royce Lewis is kind of a 2010 guy when you look at the projections. So I definitely go that direction. And the batting average, I don't think will be too bad for him as well. So I like him a lot. I picked him up on a team a few weeks back when he was available.
2 outfielders for James's point league: Buxton, Lamont Wade Jr., Jorge Soler, Luis Matos, and Lourdes Gurriel. I'm going. So I love Lamont Wade, but I'm probably going Soler and Buxton there.
Yeah, I don't do points league, so I'm a little out of my depth here, but I like your call as well. They both play 7 games as well, and I think when you're playing in a weekly format like that, maximizing those plate appearances is really critical.
Agreed. The Giants play 7 also. I'd have to look at the handedness before I know about Lamont Wade. Looks like they got
6 righties and 1 lefty.
Snell's the only lefty. Snell's been killing people. But
he's been really good.
I like Lamont Wade a lot. I'd probably have to go with the other 2. But let's jump into that's a good segue into looking at Week 13. We do have a handful of teams with 7 games. Miami, Arizona, San Diego, San Francisco, and Pittsburgh in the National League. Boston, Kansas City, and Minnesota in the American League. We You got a bunch of teams this week, Toby, with 5 games. So you want to make sure you're looking at rosters and stuff there. The Cardinals, the Dodgers, the Cubs, the Angels, and Baltimore have 5 games. It's a lot of teams with 5 games this week. How much did you look at that as you're looking at teams? It looks like I think the Cardinals have 2 games off in the middle of the week. They're going to London, right? Is that why the Cardinals and Cubs are playing in London this weekend?
They are, which is very unfortunate because I happen to have like a few Cubs and Cardinals on my lineups, and there's nothing worse than that 2-game back end of the week that you can get there. But yeah, that's really what I look at. I look at how many games are people playing? There are those players that are kind of in your roster or in your lineup every single week, and you just kind of set it and forget it. But then there's that grouping that's kind of, sometimes in there, sometimes not, your streamers. And so I'm really looking at plate appearances. I'm looking at the splits like you mentioned, I have Lamont Wade on a few teams. And so looking about him, will he be able to fill in my corner infield spot there? And it moved from, it was 2 righties, 2 lefties. And then I think Weathers is no longer scheduled to start. I think they're putting Nick Martinez into the rotation, or at least as an opener there. And so that made me feel good about it. So just examples like that, where you do that. And with 2 games in the first part of the week, those guys are generally going to be on my bench unless they're my truly elite bats.
Agree there too. And when it's a 2-gamer, I'm taking most of those guys out unless it's the elite guys, and I'm not taking those dudes out. Although I took out fringy, got a guy right on the edge of that Christian Yelich this week, and he homered in his second at bat. Then he had 2 hits, and I was just like, I give up. I'll put him back in. But it's one of those things. I played a 4-gamer for him. It's the right play, but it's still frustrating when it doesn't work out.
I had that exact scenario happen on the team that I share with Brian Slack, and we were both kind of celebrating in our minds. And then I checked the roster, and I was like, oh my gosh, we're not playing him.
Yep. He's one of those guys you have in, probably 51 of the 52 periods if he's healthy. It's just it's like the one that I saw the homer. I was like, I'm just turn off Milwaukee box scores until Friday. Was there any teams you were really focusing on in terms of trying to attack schedules this week? I really like the Marlins this week. They have 3 against Toronto, 4 against Pittsburgh. The Padres look pretty nice with 4 at the Giants, 3 at Detroit. The Twins look good. The Nats are kind of sneaky this week, 3 against the Cardinals, who have become a really bad team all of a sudden. 1 against Arizona and 3 against the Padres. I thought they were a little bit sneaky, and that's a team you could actually pick guys up on too. Were there any offenses you really were trying to find some streamers on this week? Who do you like on this week on offense?
Yeah, just really trying to maximize those 7 gamers. So if there are players that are kind of on the wire who are on, the Twins, for instance, I think the Twins play 7 right-handed pitchers. So especially when you have both those 7 games and then you have, a number of guys who are, it's like all righties or all lefties, and you're able to really see where those platoon splits are going to hit. Somebody just threw in the chat, Victor Robles, he was on a bunch of my lines as well, coming back on the teams that I was short on steals. Those seven games can really make a huge difference. I think one of the challenges I play mostly 15s, and in those scenarios, any of the guys that you really want to play on those teams that have 7 games are generally gone. Yeah, for sure. One team that I looked at was actually thinking about next week, and the back end of this week was Colorado. They go back, they have 9 straight games at Coors, including the back end of this week. And all 6 games next week. And so trying to get them now instead of trying to get them next week, some of those guys that may get a little bit of playing time. I wasn't able to be that successful, but I did get Mickey Moniak, and he's going to have 2 out of 3 in Colorado. So with the way outfield looks in 15 teamers, that's what you got to settle for sometimes.
And the nice thing with the Rockies is they have 3 at Cincinnati to start this week too. So they're going 3 at Cincinnati, then 9 at home. It's a really good stretch of games for them. Moniak's an interesting one. I was looking at that too. And you're right. Outfielders and 15s are tough. I have one main event team where I have 2 outfielders and I cannot fill those spots. I'm cycling every week. I'm I got to try and hit on somebody, and I'm hoping to get there at some point, but man, I'm cycling between some bad outfielders. It's rough on the back end trying to find anybody getting at bats. And I keep cycling through, hoping I'm going to hit on some guys I want to keep.
It's that Houston platoon in the outfield, right? Where you're do I go with Jake Myers, Corey Julks, or Chaz McCormick this week? That's what I feel like with my outfield on a couple teams for sure.
Funny you say that. I've had Julks off and on that team, I think 3 times too. So yeah, it's the same kind of spot. Let's see. Yeah, some 6 gamers. You mentioned the Rockies. I do like the Jays a lot this week too. They're 3 at Miami and then 3 against Oakland. We always want to attack Oakland pitchers these days. Pitching a little better. Hogan Harris was really good this week, but for the most part, you still want to attack those pitchers. They do get Kevin Gossman. So it's a little tough on the front end there, but Kevin Gossman's on their team, so they do not face him. I meant they face Sandy Alcantara in that game. It's Gossman, Alcantara. Good movement into some players I want to ask you about. I want to ask you about Alcantara. Do you? This is a crazy. I mean, this is a second rounder, guy who won the Cy Young last year. He has the fourth worst ERA among 66 qualified starting pitchers. We're in the middle of June, so it's not like he had 3 bad starts. Like, it seems like every start he pitches a couple of good innings, then has all that one blow up inning. He faced the Nationals this week and he had 10 hits and 5 earned runs. He had 5 to the A's about 2 weeks ago too. How do you feel about Alcantara? I always mess up his name. And what are you doing with him? Like, obviously, you just keep starting him unless you're in the shallowest of leagues. But do you feel like this is some bad luck in here? How do you feel like his odds are of turning this thing around?
Yeah, I don't have any Sandy this year. I think it's one of those situations where if you combine this year with last year, you're probably looking at close to what his true skill set is. And I think that's one of the challenges when a guy has a season like Sandy had last year. And I think we see this all the time where you're like, how is this guy, the projections don't like him as much, or, you see all the reasons why he's going to continue to be successful and continue to do what he's done because he was so good last year. But I think he got so lucky in so many areas last year that it really kind of papered over some of the flaws that he has. I mean, the strikeout rate has never necessarily been elite. And so he's having balls be put in play. And the reason he was able to go so long in so many games last year is because he was able to maintain, that low BABIP, not giving up a lot of home runs, facing fewer batters. He had his lowest walk rate by far last year as well. And so all of those things kind of combine to give him the volume that he had, which was just kind of unprecedented in today's game. And then now that you see him giving up those hits, though, the innings are a little bit longer. There's a higher pitch count. More of them are falling in. And so I really think when you combine the 2 years, you're probably getting a good sense of Sandy, which is still a very good pitcher, but more of like a 3 to 3.5 ERA guy with a little bit of an elevated with a decent whip, but again, not in like the greatest situation with Miami for wins. So I think he's been unlucky this year, was lucky last year. He's probably the combination of the two.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. I mean, you look at his strand rate's like 60% right now. Like, that's a pretty absurdly low strand, but career is like 73%. But if you're in a trade league, are you doing everything you can to try and buy low on him? How do you kind of feel on that?
Yeah, I definitely think that it's a situation where if you can take advantage of it, the challenge always with the buy low is like the guy who's got him is maybe like, yeah, I want to get rid of this guy, but also like, I can't get rid of him now because I was relying on this guy for 200 innings. I think he's definitely going to get better. You mentioned the strand rate. The one thing that I'll say again is like last year it was at 78.8% and his career is 73%, right? Yeah. So what does it probably end at? Like probably like 68, 70% this year. The K's should be there a little bit higher. He's at 19.4%. The swinging strike rate is decent. The in zone contact rate is decent as well. So I think those will go up a little bit too. So all in all, I think he'll be fine moving forward, but it is incredibly frustrating. You see him get these matchups like against the A's, and I can't remember who it was this week, but it wasn't a great team. And you're just kind of like, come on, man, like pull it together. I'm not saying that, but I know that his owners are saying that out there. Yeah, no, it was the Nationals earlier this week, and the same kind of thing. Good point by Timothy Tunks in the chat. They do have a pretty poor defense in Miami. A lot of second basemen, a lot of guys who probably should be DHing. The outfield is not great, so probably not getting help there either. The Marlins are overall playing really well, but the defense is not especially strong. It's wild that the Marlins are 10 games over 500 with Alcantara having an ERA in the bottom 5 in baseball. Like, if he gets going. This team could be pretty good and be pretty solid in the squad car race. I don't know if they're going to necessarily challenge the Braves, who are pretty easily the best team in the National League. If you look at run differential, you look at record, they're pretty much smoking the entire field in the NL. They're plus 100 run differential. Nobody else above plus 50. Toby, know who the second highest run differential team in the National League is? It's got to be the Reds, right? It's not the Reds. They started out too slow. It's actually the San Francisco Giants, plus 48. Really? That's fascinating. They swept the Dodgers this weekend to pass them. It was the Dodgers for a long time, and the Dodgers were up there. But Dodgers are in third now. Giants are coming right now. They are moving. They got a lot. They call up all their young guys. They've rapidly gone from a super boring old team to a really pretty fun young team. I don't know how they're good. It's one of those years like. Kind of all their years in the World Series, like, how is this team this good? But here we are again, and they're playing really good ball right now. Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, it's fascinating. I had no idea that they were doing that well. But when you put together some of their pitchers, I mean,
Yeah,
Webb's had a really good season so
he has.
far. Desclafani's been, better than you would expect him to be as well. Cobb has obviously been really good. It's a bummer that he's
Yeah.
going to the IL. They have a really strong bullpen. I was actually looking at that this week, and Taylor Rogers has really turned it on. He's been absolutely phenomenal over the last little bit, and then putting together they just platoon the heck out of you, which is frustrating for fantasy. But
Yep.
when you have players like Lamont Wade, I mean, who's just legitimately a really good patient hitter with a little bit of pop, I guess it results in something good, and that's what we're seeing.
Yeah. Speaking of the National League West, there was a lot of talk in the preseason about Corbin Carroll. He was the hot helium guy. He moved up a lot in drafts. He was like kind of a mid to late third rounder by the time we got to Vegas. Dude has a chance at the NL MVP right now. The Diamondbacks are leading the West. They're ahead of the Giants. They're ahead of the Dodgers. Carroll's got he's got 15 home runs, 19 steals, hitting 307. Sky's the limit for this dude. What are we looking at in drafts next year? Is it like a top 8 pick, top 5 pick? What are we talking here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on obviously how he finishes off the season. Right. He's riding a high BABIP, but that's what he's had so far in his major league career, and it's not like a 340. Like, it's probably a little bit higher than you're going to get, but still, it's not outrageous. It's not Tim Anderson levels BABIPs, although he's been able to maintain those a little bit too. The home run per fly ball rate looks pretty big. He's got 15 homers on 19 barrels, which is a metric that I like to look at just to see how sustainable somebody's power looks. So it may be that
is that about right, or where is that high?
No, that's high. Yeah,
okay.
So that's above 75%. Okay. League average is generally like 58 to low 60s%, depending on the season and the bounciness of the ball. But obviously, I think the benefit of a guy like him is just that even when he's getting on base, he's racking up steals. The Diamondbacks have, they're not the best lineup, but, they're a tough lineup to face. And they're another team that likes to take advantage of those platoons. And they've got some players that are really making, like Ketel Marte's having a really nice season after a couple down seasons. So we'll see if they're able to kind of maintain that, and Carroll's able to maintain it a lot, but I'm totally wrong on him. I have him nowhere. I'm usually one of those skeptical people who's very skeptical of the rookies, right. For reasons that we've seen, like Jordan Walker and others, but sometimes they hit, and when they do, and they have a skill set like he does, they can be real phenomenal contributors.
Yeah, I had to look. I know that MJ Melendez is on the flip side of that home runs per barrel. He has 20 barrels and 6 home runs, so that's a pretty wild mix. Part of that's playing in Kansas City. Part of that's probably a little unlucky too. But you mentioned Tim Anderson. He's been one of the bigger busts. I know there's a lot.
What does he do, Scott? Exactly. I'm trying to figure out what Tim Anderson does right now, and I'm not sure.
Aside from drive me crazy, yeah, I took him over Wander Franco in the Vegas main event league, and that's just that's like a crippling mistake right there. Like, it's just I don't know how you come back from that, because Anderson has no home runs. He's hitting 250 right now for whatever he was, 5th, 6th round pick. Like, brutal. What do you? He has a sore shoulder right now too. He missed the game today, but it sounds like he's not going the out. Sounds like he'll be okay. But what does one do with someone? This is a question I get a lot in this time of year in fantasy. Like, I drafted this guy in the 5th or 6th round. I tend to be maybe a little stubborn with those guys, and I've tried to get better at that. Where I every once in a while I look in August and I'm like, why am I playing this guy, and why have I been playing for 2 straight months? Do you bench Tim Anderson and kind of look for a light at the end of the tunnel here? Maybe he starts to get hot, and if he misses a home run or 2 or a couple steals, like, oh well. Or do you keep playing him? Or are you stubborn? What do you usually do with someone like this?
Yeah, I really think it depends on what your options are, obviously. Like, for me, I actually benched him in 2 leagues this weekend. And I'm going to start benching him more, I think. One of the things that I think...
What kind of level player are we talking?
Gosh, I mean, I think I'm pretty flush at I think I bench him. I mean, not like that flush, but like Dansby Swanson, Javi Baez, that type of player. The challenge, and this is something I dropped Gene Segura pretty early on. And I think one of the challenges with the new ball, right, is like the newer new ball or whatever's the new ball, right? The bouncier ball, home runs being up, batting average being up generally as well, is those guys that we loved, like Anderson, who contributes in batting average, who contributes in speed as his primary categories. When those guys in this environment, they're devalued, I think, significantly, because you can't have those guys that are giving you those low single digit home runs in an environment like this.
Yep.
And his batting average is not going to be as valuable, even though it is. He has been really bad since he came back from his injuries. So I factor that in and wondering if it's there. But the dude's got 0 home runs. And then when you look at his barrel rate, like he's got 6 barrels, 3.6% barrel rate. So, I mean, he should have at least a few in there, but he hasn't really been stealing either. I think it was his knee or his ankle that he messed up when he went on the IL. He did steal a base this weekend, yesterday before he got injured. And so maybe there's some hope there, but right now I just don't see what he's contributing. He doesn't get on base very often. So the runs, even in a good lineup, are not elite necessarily. And so right now it's just a combination. And I want to see a player who's good, or a player who's got 4 games versus 3 games, or, so on and so forth.
I was going to make a snide comment about you putting Dansby Swanson and Javier Baez in the same sentence, and I looked at their numbers, and they're actually really close.
Oh, are they? Yeah, Dansby got off super hot.
Yeah.
We talk about home runs per barrel. Dansby Swanson, Ryan Bloomfield does the Bloom boards, which are fantastic. And he put out a home runs per barrel one. And the lowest guy it's actually 2 guys who started off so hot. Dansby started off really hot, but he's got the lowest home runs per barrel. And then the second worst is Brian Reynolds, I think, who came out the gate, had like 5 home runs right off the bat, and only has 2 home runs over the last 2 months or something like that, including one today. So, it's one of those, with guys like that, I'm hopeful that will turn around. There are certain parks, like you mentioned, where guys will have lower home runs per barrels. One of the places is Tigers, is Comerica. So I'm always mindful of that, but I think those should turn around. I think we'll see a home run for Reynolds and for Swanson here pretty soon.
It's just funny how you get something stuck in your head. I'm just like, Swanson's much better than Baez, and I looked, and their counting stats are pretty close. Baez has 5 homers, 5 steals. Dansby's only 7 and 4, higher batting average, but they're actually a lot closer than I thought they would be. Swanson has 25 barrels and 7 home runs. That's we mentioned MJ Melendez. That's right in there at the similar percentage. Funny that someone just asked in the chat about Wilson Contreras. He was actually my next guy to talk about. He has been in a brutal slump lately. He's hitting 118 since May 18th. I just went a month back to see how bad it's been. Hitting 118 a month back. He does have 5 home runs over that stretch, but hit 2-0 run right now, 8 home runs. That does have 5 steals, which is obviously really big at the catcher position. You just don't get that. How do you feel about Contreras right now, kind of struggling in his first season in St. Louis?
Yeah, I mean, you always got to factor in like how much the pressure is playing on him. He got off to such a bad start just in terms of like the media and his manager. Like, I don't know what Ollie Marmol does in St. Louis and why he still has a job, but the guy loves to throw players under the bus. Like, he's really, really good at it, especially a guy in like the first year of a mega deal. It's like, you're going to have this guy for a while. You may want to just like, he seemed like he was pretty good previously. Just taking a look at him, like the BABIP is low, so he's getting unlucky with the 236 BABIP. He's also like a high ground ball rate guy, so there's not really a clear reason why that should be happening. His contact rate is actually the best that it's ever been in any season so far in his career, at 74%, his overall contact rate. So it's not that. He's chasing a little bit. His home runs per fly ball is low, but he's got 18 barrels, and what does he have? He's got 8 home runs. So he's a little off track there. So if you give him 12 home runs instead of the 8, and you add those as hits, he's not too far off of where he is. And these things can still turn around really quickly. So I'd say there's nothing in the profile that really jumps out to me. His ground ball rate is actually lower than it usually is. So I think he's fine. He'll be a guy that kind of surges in the second half, would be my guess.
And he's a catcher. There's nothing you really can do about him anyway, except keep running him out there. But it's just it's tough that it's been such a rough last month. A guy who's on the flip side. Funny, you talked about guys who guys I never take out of my lineup. Whit Merrifield was someone that was like a fringy guy for me to start the year. Like, some weeks I'll start him. Depends who they're facing. The handedness of pitcher. He was sitting a bunch. He's been really good lately. 356 over the last month. He was hitting second this weekend for the Jays. Obviously, that is a prime spot. Hitting, whether between Springer and Vlad or Springer and Bo, whatever it may be, moving up that lineup is pretty significant. What are we looking at with Whit? I mean, he's never a guy who hit the ball hard, but he's got 18 stolen bases already. He's already topped his stolen base total from last year. He had 16 last year. He's almost halfway to that 40 mark in 2021 that pushed his price way up last year. And obviously last year was a big letdown for a lot of people. Not a home run guy. He only has 2 home runs. What do you feel about Merrifield right now? Is this a kind of a BABIP-driven dream right now? Do you think he can kind of hang in there? The stolen bases seem to be back. He's been pretty valuable for, especially considering where he was drafted, second base, outfield eligible, which is really nice with Merrifield.
Yeah, I think it's probably pretty BABIP driven. I mean, the batting average is never going to hurt you, but he's above 300. Right. He's got a 361 BABIP, which is well above where he usually is. And I mean, it's easy to just say like, oh, it's BABIP driven. But I think the challenge with a guy like Witt is, when that BABIP dips, he's not going to be getting on base. He's not going to be stealing bases. He's going to drop down in the lineup as well. The power is he's got 2 homers on 6 barrels, I think, but his max EV is down 3 miles per hour. So he's just not hitting the ball as hard. He's probably just focusing on contact, which again is totally good while you're kind of focused on it. And with what he's already done this season, if he hits 260, 250 rest of the season, he's still going to end up at 275 and in a pretty good spot. So I think you're feeling really good about having him. He wouldn't necessarily be a guy. He'd be a guy where once he starts to strike, I mean, it could be bad.
Yeah.
I think.
And yeah, it's a good point too. Like you got to ride these streaks while they're there. And he's the point now where I just leave him in every week. But he's someone that I look at every period or whatever, the half weeks in the NFBC and kind of check where he's at. But he's been really good and really valuable. And a team that needs steals, I mean, he's been huge for that because it's just a source you were maybe hoping to get 25 from. We're already kind of there. Last thing I want to ask you before we jump into FAAB, Aaron Nola is kind of all over the place these days. I know you're really good at breaking down pitchers, so I wanted to ask you about Nola. Where are you on him right now? Because it kind of feels like we're always in the same place with him. Obviously so good, and we look at everything and it all looks really good. And then you look at the ERA and WHIP, which would obviously matter to us. The WHIP's good; it's under 1.1, but the ERA is 4.6. He does have the 6 wins. But where are you on Nola right now as we kind of jump into almost the second half here?
Yeah, where am I on Nola? I'm trying to figure out whether to start him this week at home against Atlanta. It feels really, really scary. And the
strikeouts are way down.
Yeah, I mean, he's been better recently with the strikeouts. At least my page was not loading here, or it's loading incredibly slowly. So I don't have his metrics in front of me. I have him in one league, and it's kind of been the bane of my existence, but it's one of those things. I mean, I wish I could just give the super easy answer, which is it's an odd year, and he does well one year, and then he does poorly the next year, and well one year, and then poorly the next year. Okay. So I have it in front of me right here. So just looking at him, the swinging strike rate is actually in line with what it usually is. The walk rate is a little bit up. He's getting fewer chases on pitches outside the zone. In-zone contact rate is up as well, but I wouldn't be surprised if you took a look at the last 5 games or so that's improving. He got off to a really slow start in that department. He's got a 61.9% strand rate, so he's in the Sandy Alcantara zone there. So hopefully he'll get out of that, and then a 1.43 home runs per 9 is going to doom you in that league where so he had a 4.63 ERA and a 1.13 WHIP with 223 strikeouts in 2021. Yep. So the last odd year, it looks remarkably similar to that without so much of the strikeouts. But I think that those will come. I think the strand rate will help out a little. It will improve a little bit. So I'm hopeful that we're going to get, closer to what we were thinking we were getting with him. He's one of those guys where you're really hoping he goes on that streak of 4 or 5 starts where he gives up 1 or 0 earned runs. And all of a sudden you look and he's back at a 3.5. Zach Wheeler did that recently where I think he had that awful outing 3 starts ago. And then he's given up, I think, 1 earned run in his last 3 starts. And he's back to kind of where we expected him to be. So I'm hopeful that the same thing will happen to Nola, but it's really tough. He gives up a lot of home runs. And that's tough.
You are right on the strikeouts lately. He has the last 3 starts done 20 innings with 28 strikeouts. So maybe that's a good sign there. The velo's down a little bit, but still kind of in the same range. He's 92 on the fastball. He's 92.6 last year, 92.7 the year before, 92.4 the year before that. So it's kind of in that same range, down a half tick maybe, but I don't think that's a big concern. So if I'm you, I'm throwing him against Atlanta unless I have the world's greatest pitching staff and you have someone really good there. But I think I'm probably throwing him. I'm not ready to bench him quite yet.
Yeah, he has a 22% K- walk rate over his last 5 starts. So I think he's getting there. It's just been that one big inning with him. It always is. Last start, he's cruising, gives up 4 runs, and you're like, I can't stand this guy. Then he finishes with 7 seven innings and 4 earned runs and 9 strikeouts. You're like, oh, okay, I guess it's all right.
I saw multiple "Am I dropping Aaron Nola" posts like on after the first inning last week, and I'm like, no, A, not dropping him, and B, he polished it up pretty nicely. But yeah, I mean the Braves are obviously really good, but I think I'm probably starting that. But,
yeah, I've got to. I'm a projections person, and when you have like a guy who's projected as a top 50 starter and a 15, you got to go with it.
Do you rank all your projections for the week and then you have them ranked? Is that how you kind of go about it? How strict are you with that?
Yeah, it's more as kind of like a guide. So I use Razzball weekly projections, and so I'll take a look at those and kind of see what I think what's happened that's been really beneficial is really realizing the difference between the home and road. When you look at a guy's projections on a weekly basis, especially pitchers, like there's a real difference between home and road, and it really, in my experience, we could take a peek, but it really seems to bear out. And it's like, it's a game of inches. And so when you're getting those calls, when you're at home, that you wouldn't be getting on the road, like that makes a really big difference. And so that's what I oftentimes will look at. Like I probably wouldn't do Nola at the Braves, but I'll probably do that home start.
Question in the chat. Angela mentioned the Cards have 2 off days this week. We did cover that earlier. They're going to London, so they have 2 days off to kind of travel and all that, playing the Cubs this weekend. You mentioned you have Goldie and Arenado. I'm starting Goldie and Arenado in all those periods anyway. So I think a 5-game period, I assume you mean a weekly league. I'm starting those guys with 5 anyway. So I wouldn't worry about that. It's more the fringy guys that I worry about and try and get them out. Let's talk about FAAB this week. It was the first week in a while we didn't have like that big one stud rookie. It's been a pitcher a bunch. It was Ellie De La Cruz. There's been a lot of big names. There were a couple in there. I was surprised by one starter that got pretty popular. We'll talk about in a second. But let's start with hitters. I think Bo Naylor, catcher in Cleveland, the Guardians DFA'd Mike Zunino. Bo Naylor got called up. He was 60% rostered in the main event. How do you feel about Naylor? Do you have him available in any of your spots? And if so, what'd you do with him? Or what did he go for in your leagues where he was available?
Yeah, I don't think I had him available in a single league.
I didn't either.
Yeah, so it wasn't super helpful. I think he's fine. I think the thing about the rookies is that we have this, we see the ceiling or we see the floor, right? It's like very rarely that we see kind of the in-between. Naylor, the projections have him as kind of like an 18-9 guy as a catcher, hitting 243 in Cleveland with 75 and 75. I mean, that's fantastic. And, with catcher's been kind of up and down this year. So I could see going after him strong if you really are missing on catcher. But, there's a couple other players. There's Jorge Alfaro. I don't know if he played today or not, but he had played 3 of his first 4 games with the Rockies. The Rockies have a really nice schedule coming up, even though they're not playing 7 games. They got that Ant Cincy, and then they've got the 9 straight at Coors. There's Yainer Diaz as well, who's been playing almost every day with the Astros. So there's some other options that were probably cheaper. But, I could see going after Naylor if that was kind of a weakness that you had on your team that you wanted to fill.
He was picked up in 21 leagues, the main event. So probably every league, that's probably just the math, right? That's probably 40% of the leagues. The range was 8 to 158. So there was obviously a huge range. I mean, usually that's a pretty big range right there. Especially when it was only 21 leagues. Usually when you have picked up in every league, there's gonna be a big range. But Naylor was, there was some popular, there was a lot of people who were stashing him too, which is always tough to stash that third catcher. There are people starting him at second catcher, just figuring, it's either that or taking a $150 average with a couple of home runs. But I wouldn't have gone quite that high. I think I would have been on him if I didn't. He was taken in all 3 of my main events, but he was definitely the biggest name. Do you prefer him or Yainer Diaz in Houston, who's also not only playing some catcher but kind of moving around, getting some other at bats across the line, playing some DH with Yordan out. Do you prefer Naylor or Yainer Diaz?
Yeah, I would probably lean towards Yainer only because I've seen him do it at the major league level. I mean, when you look at his metrics, I picked him up in a couple places last week because it was unclear whether Elias Diaz was going to be going to the IL or not. And so with Yainer Diaz, I mean, you look at the barrel rate, it's really good. The contact rate is really good as well. He's in a good spot with the Astros, obviously, and he's not hitting too far down that lineup. I think he's been like 5th and 6th this week and playing almost every single day. So I'd probably go with Yainer just because I generally will lean towards, like, the reason why I'm not in on Carroll is because I see a lot of variance, and I see him going higher in drafts, right? And so I don't want to buy into that variance and get Jordan Walker, like obviously Carroll can be great. Naylor could be great. He could also not be a major league caliber player, and we don't know. Yep. So the fact Yiner's done it for half a season now and has some really good metrics, I'd go with that.
Yeah, Diaz was added in 18 leagues, a min of 1 and a max of 41. So Naylor was definitely more popular, and I think the big name, big prospect kind of stuff. I probably lean Diaz at the moment. Also, we mentioned the Giants a little bit earlier. They called up their prospect Luis Matos has been absolutely crushing it in the minors so far. What did you do with Matos? So, the key with the Giants. You mentioned earlier, we're talking about how well they're playing, but it's the platooning is frustrating. We get a lot of that. There are a couple of core guys that they don't platoon, but the rest of the lineup they play, they're in and out a lot. Matos is a righty, so it's on the shorter side of that platoon, facing lefties if that's the case. But what did you do with Matos this weekend? Another guy where the bids were all over the place. He was adding all 53 in the main event league, so he was added everywhere. Min was 12, max was 142. So the range, I saw the range pretty far and wide, but in my leagues, it was pretty consistent. He was like right in the 50 to 60 to 70 range, kind of in that $20 range in all three of my leagues. What did you do with Matos, and how do you feel about him kind of moving forward, both playing time and kind of what he does when he does play?
Yeah, it's tough. I didn't do much, honestly, but it's more a product of not having a lot of money left. Okay. I got Ellie in a few different spots, and so I'm down to $100 or so. So he was on my bid list. He was pretty high up, but just for a couple bucks because I don't have that much to spend. And again, like the rookie variants, like he could be absolutely phenomenal. Like he's got the skills, like you mentioned, like he was tearing it up. He actually has a really good projection batting average wise. I think 273, which you very rarely see with rookies. Yeah. And a little bit of power and speed. And it could be one of those things where, he gets you 10 and 10 instead of 5 and 7 the rest of the season, or, whatever it is. So I like those guys that make a lot of contact and have a high batting average and can steal some bases because they can help you out in a variety of different ways. But I wasn't that aggressive because you also don't know with the Giants what exactly they're going to do with their platooning and working them in and out of the lineup, and it can get pretty crowded there sometimes when everybody gets healthy. So I wasn't super aggressive, but I can see why people were interested.
Yeah, I was more in the 30 to 40 range, somewhere in there, and it was just a little too low. But the thing I like with Matos is he doesn't strike out a lot. At least it has not in the minors. Like the young guys who get called up that I really tend to worry about, the ones that have big strikeout rates in the minors, because that always jumps that first time through. And even his jumps, it was 16% last year and high. Obviously, that's a huge jump up to the majors. But if that jumps to 23, 24%, you're all right. It's the guys who are like 27, 28 who jump in the mid 30s that always worry me. So I was interested. I'm kind of similar to you. I didn't have enough money to fully go all in. And I just don't trust the Giants to play him enough. I think it's gonna be frustrating fantasy wise for us to get him in the lineup. If you need steals this week, there's a couple of names here, and they both happen to play for the same team. They both play for the Royals. Samad Taylor and Dayron Blanco both are burners. Blanco is eligible in the outfield. Samad Taylor was eligible in the infield, second base eligible. So, yeah, maybe it depended what position you needed, but the Blanco stats are crazy. This dude has a ton of stolen bases. He has 47 stolen bases in AAA in 49 games. Like I looked at that 3 times to make sure I wasn't reading that wrong. And it's funny. I think it was Ryan Bloomfield in his FAAB article that wrote like this is not a typo. Like actually he has the 47 stolen bases. What'd you do with these guys? Are there any leagues where you really need steals? You were aggressive with these guys. They were popular in my leagues too. Taylor went over $30 in all 3 of my leagues. So I missed him there. I did get Dayron Blanco in one league where I need stolen bases badly. What did you kind of do with these guys? Do you think they're going to play? Because I think the playing time is the big issue here. The Royals just have kind of a lot of guys. Like none of them are studs, but just a lot of guys.
Yeah, they do. I was a little bit aggressive with Taylor. I like him. Like if you plug him, like Blanco, I think could be really good too, but it feels like Taylor has a little bit more of that pedigree. I think Blanco is like 30. Yeah, he's 30 years old. So while he could be really good. I mean, Whit Merrifield was like 28 when he came up or something like that. Like he could still be incredibly valuable this year. It just seems like he maybe isn't as much a part of their plans. And I watched him a few times this week because he was playing against my Reds. And so I got to tune in for all of those. I love it.
Our Reds, Toby, our Reds.
Yeah. I mean, when you got like McLean, India, and Ellie, like 3 in a row, I'm always tuned in when that's happening. But I saw him a couple times, and honestly, like, didn't seem like he was hitting the ball real hard. Like a lot of just kind of like even his base hits were kind of little I don't know. I mean, I don't even know what to call them, honestly. Like they were like kind of jam shots to the opposite field. And so I don't know whether he'll be able to hit major league pitching to get on base, and then not knowing like exactly whether he's a big part of their plans or not, given his age. I was a little bit less aggressive with him, but Taylor seems like, he's got legit pedigree. When you look at his projection over 600 plate appearances, I think it's like 1536 or something like that. So pretty good. And so, or maybe it was 9-36. I can't remember exactly, but it was pretty good. And so I was a little bit more aggressive with him. I was in the 20s with him in some places, teens with him in some places. And I like the fact that I think he's playing outfield and he's got that second base eligibility as well. And so down the road, he should get that. And there's no reason why they shouldn't give him some run. So I may be kind of down on myself a little bit later on, thinking about not getting him, because there are a couple leagues where I really do need steals.
Yeah, it's funny you say that on Taylor, because I saw him playing outfield. So I just went to outfield in FBC and he wasn't there. And I'm like, am I missing something? Like, is he not eligible? Did someone actually have this dude already? And then I realized that I just plugged his name. He was second base eligible. I was like, oh, there he is. So I actually preferred him to showing a little bit of pop in the minors too. Like he had 16 home runs in 2021. He had 6 so far this year. So it's not like a dead pop guy, which is really nice, but 34 stolen bases in AAA. Like, how much is the AAA team in Kansas City running? Like, this is insane. They got 2 guys over 30 bags already.
Yeah. I don't know. They could use some skill up in the majors. So glad to see them adding some of those guys. It's been nice to see like all the youth coming up recently. Like I joke about the Reds, but you mentioned the Giants. Like teams putting those guys in there, and it really, for the fans, it makes it just such a different game. So
yeah, it has been a lot of fun. We talk about these guys a lot in FAAB, and it's just been fun to talk about these guys. Some in the chat asked McLean, Lamont Wade, or Nolan Jones this week. The Reds are home for 6. I'm playing McLean hitting second in that lineup and kind of moving on, but I'm biased because I love Matt McLean.
Yeah, for sure. I'd probably go McLean, Jones, and then Wade. I do love Wade, but Jones is playing every day. They've got the 3 at Cincy and then the 3 in Coors as well. But Matty McLean, if I had to pick one player to go in my lineup this week, it would be Matty McLean.
So we're at Matty McLean or Ronald Acuna is where we're reaching in the chat.
That's I was telling my kids, I was like, this is Matty McLean. He is the best player in baseball. Just get used to it.
Guys like that are so fun when you pick guys up and they actually do well. It's so much fun. Benjamin in the chat is asking, utility spot open. Who do I pick up? We need a few more names. You give us some names, we could probably pick somebody. But not knowing your league, it's hard to just come up with a bunch of names. So give us some names. We'll answer that one. Toby, anybody else in the outfield? We mentioned Victor Robles is back. He's hits down the order, but can run a little bit. Mike Tauchman's leading off for the Cubs. I looked at his metrics and I got a little less excited than I was after I saw him leading off. Matt Vierling's playing really well in Detroit. He was only 23% rostered in the main event. He was scratched on Sunday with back spasms, which you never love to see with a guy that, part of his value is stealing. Michael A. Taylor got hit in the head today, but was with a curveball. It sounds like he's okay, but he's putting up some power speed with bad batting average. I've listed off a few names there. We got Edward Olivares, Aaron Hicks. Is there anybody else in the outfield kind of after the Matos, Blanco, the guys we already talked about? Is there anybody else in the outfield you were looking at?
Oh man, this is really painful, Scott. You're going to make me have to go through my my bid list on that one outfield team I was telling you about.
I had a bad one too, where I got like the 9th guy on my list. It did not make me happy.
Yeah, Jake Bauers. They've got 5 out of 6 against righties, including the first half of the week against them. Jesse Winker came back. He's hit second both times. I don't feel good about it.
Move on.
Yeah, totally. Jake Myers, I think I actually won him. He's actually been playing a decent amount. He's been playing, I think, 3 out of 4. He's been playing the most out of that outfield group, but still, I think he's got close to 200 plate appearances, but by now, and he's got 6 homers and 3 steals. So, it's nothing to write home about. Chas McCormick, Luis Matos, Billy McKinney is playing for the Yankees.
You were really digging.
Oh God, Will Benson. Will Benson's actually looked really good, but the problem is, they only got 6 and they've got 1 lefty. So you're only getting 2 games. He's hitting at the back end of the lineup. He's not near Matty McLean, and that's can't get the goodness to rub off on him. Vierling, you mentioned, he was at the top of my list heading into this week, but with the back spasms after being on the IL with the back issue and needing an outfielder that I can actually make sure I can plug in this week. I couldn't go with him. So he'd be a really good one. He's been hitting the ball great. Stuart Fairchild's another one that actually has been really good and playing pretty much every day for the Reds, but he's also been injured. I had Blanco. I had Mickey Moniak, who I did end up getting in at least one league as well. They've only got the two games first half of this week, but then 2 out of 3 against a righty in Coors. But it's pathetic out there.
It's rough. Anybody in the infield you liked? John Birdie was at 79% roster in the main event, but he's getting a lot more playing time with Gene Segura out. Garrett Cooper in Miami, 40% roster main event. He hits the middle lineup. He's always just kind of blah, and then he gets hurt. Was there anybody else in the infield you like? Because I found it tough after Samad Taylor had a couple of interesting guys that were like one-off guys available in leagues, but I found the infield kind of blah this week too.
Yeah, I did too. I mean, hitters this whole time have been pretty rough. One guy that I've liked is he's actually outfield eligible. He was available in a couple leagues. It was Pavin Smith. He's got 7 righties this week after having a bunch of righties. Other infield names, so Elihuris Montero. Again, I'm not like. Usually with teams, I'll look and I'll be like, hey, is there a pattern to the way you're playing these people? Like, is it a platoon thing? Is it not? With the Rockies, you just don't know. So like
that only works for 29 teams.
Yeah, right. Like Montero just doesn't really make sense. Coco Montes is another one. I did see that Ezequiel Tovar. I think he's going on paternity leave. He left the game early today to be with his wife in labor. So maybe Coco Montes gets a little bit more of a run there. But again, these are guys that I really don't feel confident they're going to play 3 out of 3, probably 2 out of 3 at the most. And so I wasn't overly aggressive with them.
I'm pretty sure Elihuris Montero just struck out twice while we were having that conversation about him. My God, that guy strikes out a lot. Real quick question. Someone utility spot. Jonah Heim, Carlos Santana, Jake Myers, Perdomo, or Joey Weimer. I'd go Joey Weimer right now. He's hot. A little bit of power, a little speed. I'd probably ride that one of that group.
I mean, I don't know what the Brewers are doing, quite honestly, with Joey Weimer. Like Joey Weimer is 10-10. Like his batting average is low, but his BABIP's low. Like he is legit one of their better hitters, I think. And I'm not sure why he continues to bat 9th in that lineup, but I would probably go Weimer as well, just because you have that power speed combo. Santana's got 7 games. So that's a nice one. So I don't mind having him.
I think Santana's fried.
You think he's fried?
Just you look at the hard contact right now, and it's just so far down. Like it was always like he would hit the ball hard, he would walk a bunch. There wasn't a ton of pop, but enough that was okay. Hard hit rate's down 11% this year, down to 33%. His barrel's been cut in half. I just think he's kind of fried right now. It was always like low batting average, low BABIP, but he hit the ball hard and it would work out. But I just think there's nothing there right now. He was someone that I had on list for a couple weeks, and I looked a little closer, and I'm not interested at all.
Yeah, I think he's more of a volume play. He's got the 6 homers, 5 steals, but I agree he's not dynamic like Joey Weimer.
The 5 steals are truly absurd, by the way.
Oh, I mean, he's earned every single one of those.
It's the one guy who's like really getting better with the bigger bases. We found as Carlos Santana of all people. Let's talk about pitching. I thought this week it's been a lot of pitchers to talk about the last 2 weeks. I thought this week was really rough trying to find pitchers. Emmett Sheehan was the big name, a Dodgers pitcher, Dodgers rookie who came out and pitched really well in his first start earlier this week. But we've got issues here where we just don't know what they're doing in the rotation. Julio Urias is scheduled back probably in like 10 to 12-ish days. They mentioned in the next road trip, he's going to come back, which is like June 27th to July 2nd, if I'm remembering the math fully right there. But the thing that's freaked me out with Sheehan is just all the walks in the minors. Like usually that doesn't get better when you get to the majors. He's got a lot of walks in the minors. I was in on Sheehan, but I was nowhere near the price that he ended up going for in my leagues. What did you do with him, and how popular was he in your leagues?
Yeah, I had him for like $2.
Oh, wow. Online. So I was going to say, I thought I was low, and you were definitely lower.
Yeah, I mean, I think like there's this again, like, and I say this knowing full well, like we don't know who's going to be really good and who's not going to be really good, but we take these single starts, and we put so much value into the number of earned runs they give up. But like Sheehan, his projection, the bat has him at 4.86 with a 1.36 whip. About a strikeout an inning, which is good. The best projection for him is probably Steamer, which has him at 435 with a 1.33 whip. So neither one is that playable really, unless you play the matchups, right? And take advantage of those. But you just look at the one game he had against big league competition. He had a 4.5% swinging strike rate, a 4.5% swinging strike rate. His O swing was 19.2%. His in-zone contact was 92.3%. So like swinging strike rate, like good for a starter is probably like 11 to 12% or higher. He was like a third of that. You know, in-zone contact, like 92.3%, like think Luis Arias, like hitting. Like that's the level of contact that he's giving up.
Yep.
And then the O swing at 19.2%, I honestly can't remember seeing somebody below 20% in the O swing. But, you know, what it means is like, again, and it's one start, so things could be very, very different. But it means he's not getting guys to chase on pitches outside the zone. They're making contact with pitches when they swing inside the zone. He's not striking them out. And like you mentioned, he's got a history of walks. And so, again, it could be totally different because I know he was dominant in the minors, but I just didn't really see a reason to be interested, like especially thinking about like the following week, he's going to be at Colorado. And I just can't see myself playing that. So the 0 BABIP and the 100% strand rate are not going to hold up. And I think he'll probably be just a flash in the pan at least this year. And again, I could be totally wrong.
Yeah, he was in my Vegas main event league, the lead leaguer, Zach Waxman, who's kicking all our butts at the moment, added him for 178 with a backup of 148. So like there was, not only was he big on him, but somebody else that was really big on him too. And I know that you may get to the point like right now, if you have a bunch of money, you might as well go for it's a Dodgers pitcher. He did, you know, the strikeouts weren't there, but they were there in the minors. I mean, he was a 42% strikeout guy in the minors. So I do get it. That was AA. Jumping AA to the majors is always a big jump. You know, some teams like to do that. We talked about, I forget who it was. We talked about someone last week that jumps all their pitchers from AA to the majors. But yeah, I wasn't. I was in, but I was in like the 20s and 30s, and I was nowhere near. So that'll be an interesting one. I mean, he faces the Angels this week. The Dodgers, and you mentioned the week after he should get at Colorado. So you know, if you're picking him up, you're throwing him against the Angels. See what happens there. Should be fun to see him match up against Ohtani and Trout. What else did you do at pitching? I found pitching really hard to find. Like a couple, like guys I had one-offs that were available in some leagues, but there was not a lot available. I mean, Brian Wu was only 60% taken in the 12 or 60% roster of the 12 teamers, but he was pretty much gone in the 15s. He looked really good this week.
I really wanted him, Scott. I really wanted him. I could only go 9 because I have whatever $90 left in that league.
I hope he went for like 98 or something.
He went for 14. I was like, I should have just done the 15.
Yeah.
I mean, of all the rookie pitchers, honestly, he has looked the best. Like, Abbott, he's gonna his BABIP's not gonna be 100 for very long. Like, but from a skills perspective, Wu has actually looked the best. Like even better than Bryce Miller, I think.
Yeah, I'm a little biased because I saw Bobby Miller up close for the Dodgers and I really liked how he looked, but he got smoked this week. I mean, you look at Wu, 37% strikeout rate, 4% walk rate. Like it's really nice and it's funny because the hype went down because he got smoked in that first start. He got crushed by Texas, who by the way crushes everybody. Their offense is unbelievable, but since then, 16 strikeouts in 10.1 innings. He's given up a couple of 3 home runs in those starts. But yeah, the K to walk, if that's obviously a metric we all talk about, all look at. I mean, dude looks nasty so far. It's only 12 innings, but he was in 44 double innings. He was 34% strikeout right there, and only walk rate at 7%. So he looks pretty good. He throws his fastball a ton. I think people worried about that. Like, his secondary stuff there enough to get outs. But yeah, he looks really good. That's too bad you got outbid there because that would have been a nice ad.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I put out a tweet earlier this week, and I don't have my own podcast anymore, so I don't get to talk about these things that often. But I mean, of all the rookie pitchers that have come out, a lot of them have been successful and have been really highly sought after in FAAB. And I'm not excluding myself from this. I bid a bunch for Bryce Miller and other guys, but from a skills perspective, none of them have really been all that good. And it will come back to get them over the course of the long season. Yeah. Like even Bobby Miller has looked good. Do not get me wrong. Like he's been really good. His BABIP is still at 243. And he's at a 0.31 home runs per 9. His home run per fly ball rate is 4.5%.
Yeah.
Now that's not going to hold up. That's not going to stay there, right? He's not really striking guys out. His strikeout rate is 24.6%. He's got the 11.4% swinging strike rate, which is very solid, but the in-zone contact is 88.1%, worse than league average. The 24.6% K rate will drop just by the virtue of his BABIP going up. So like once more balls get into play, then he's throwing more pitches, he's facing more batters, and then the K percent drops. So again, all these guys could end up making a switch and being better, but what they've been so far has all been pretty much disappointing, except for Brian Wu.
It's funny. I was going to refute that with Tanner Bybee.
And Yuri Perez, maybe.
Yeah. I was going to refute that with Tanner Bybee, and I looked, and his swinging strike rate's under 10%, K rate's 22%. Like I thought he'd been a little better than that. He's been good. He was pretty good again today. He did give up 3 runs, but got the win. But you're right, it's not been like dominant where like he's blowing people away. And I thought he'd been a little better too. So yeah, that's I think Wu would have been nice for that. That's you only played 112 team. You said earlier that's the one that's way up there. That would have been a sweet ad.
Yeah.
Anybody else pitching wise? I really didn't have anybody else. Daniel Lynch throws twice this week. He's someone that was obviously a huge prospect, and he's burned me so many times.
Don't do it.
And the second starts at Tampa, so I kind of stayed away there too. The strikeout rate's under 20%. He's only thrown 23 innings, but I think he's still trying to get him all the way back. But not a lot there. Either the Pittsburgh guys introduced out to throw twice this week. Johan Oviedo is available in some 12-teamers, and then I think it's Osvaldo Bido. Yes, Osvaldo Bido, 27-year-old, get scheduled to start Monday against the Cubs. Were you in any of those guys with 2 starts this week?
I am not going there, Scott.
I'm not.
Sorry.
I didn't either.
I can't do it. I mean, honestly, like you are much better off throwing a elite relief pitcher. If you look at the percentage of chance, like the process does a really good piece on this. When you look at the wins that these guys get, I mean, they're winning like 1 out of 5 starts. So they're winning like one start a month, and as a relief pitcher, you have just about as much of a chance to just luck into a win by getting a guy who throws in a high relief situation. So I'm really steering clear of those guys. If I see players that are jumping out like Skills recently, they're much better than they would have been. Like Colin Ray is an example of a guy who has actually been pretty good from a skills perspective the last 5 weeks. He's not available in 15s, but he's a guy that was kind of on my radar. Yeah. Yusei Kikuchi, I would have gone there with him probably this week just because he's got the best 2-step you could probably have. He's got at Miami, and then he's got at home against Oakland. So those were some of the guys, but really beyond kind of Sheehan and putting a rudimentary bid there was a lot of kind of middle relief type guys, teams that have 7. I mentioned earlier, like Taylor Rogers has looked really good recently. Yes. So trying to luck into either a random save or just some good ratios there. He's got 7. There's the 2 Minnesota pitchers, Griffin Jacks and Brock Stewart, who are both looking really good. I picked up Stewart, I think, in a couple leagues, just to be like that 7-day fill-in type guy. So that's kind of what I'm doing when I'm in a situation where I got some real rough pitching outings.
Yeah, I think that's smart and really good advice there. I always look at the 2-star pitchers to see if I'm missing something, but I looked at Beto and I just saw his walk rate last year in AAA and I just moved on. It was a very, very quick move on there. It was like, oh yeah, I'm not going to, someone who's fringy and a walk guys, I don't want any part of that, despite the matchups look pretty good. As someone who started Luke Weaver in the league this week, I fully endorse the fact that, don't start these guys. It just
I went down that road too. I mean, he's on the Reds. I thought for a second, like, I was like, you want to know something? He's hanging out in the same dugout as Matty McClain and Ellie De La Cruz. Like, it's got to rub off somehow. We actually did a deep dive on kind of the thread that I'm in on him, and I was interested. And then I was like, oh, actually, I think this is just a matter of him giving up barrels that aren't being home runs for like a series of weeks. And so
it was so bad because I tried to drop him. I had him in 2 leagues, just like early. I wasn't even using him. He kind of had a couple of good starts. I'm like, I'll see what's got here. I'm going to keep him on the bench. I dropped him in one league, tried to drop him in the other, and then he came up for the 2-star week. I'm like, oh, he's got Kansas City in there. I'll use it, and it did not work out very well there. It was not great. But
don't worry, I went down the Tommy Henry route in one of my leagues. Like, what was that, this week or the week before? It was just like, oh god, and you didn't even get the 2-step out of Tommy Henry that week. So.
Yeah, that's the thing too. Like usually, guys get pushed back or they don't make that second start. It's tough, and you make a good point on the middle relievers. So speaking of relievers, has not been a lot of action in relievers, in FAAB, but we had a little bit of movement this weekend. Jordan Hicks in St. Louis got two saves over the weekend. Obviously, Ryan Helsley's out We don't fully know how long it's going to be. It doesn't sound too serious, but, it's a forearm. It sounds like the scans came back, but he's not throwing for 10 days. You got to figure it's probably another 10 days after that as he does a couple rehab stints, throws off a mound, all that kind of stuff that we always see. Hicks was popular in my leagues. He went for, I think he was in the 60s in one league, in the 40s in another, but kind of in those mid double-digit ranges, 55 in another. Jason Foley in Detroit got the 2-inning save today after Alex Lang got smoked again. I mean, he came in early and got smoked and Foley had to save him. So not only did Lang not come in a save situation, but he also was pitched really poorly. He gave up 3 runs and I think a third of an inning. So Foley may be moving forward there. You mentioned Scott McGuff. He was pretty much taken in all the main events. I think he was available in a few, but he was 35% rostered in the 12-teamers. He was probably the best guy right now. He got a save today, which is good to see. He came in for 2/3 of an inning. What'd you do with these 3 guys? I imagine Hicks is probably the most popular guy for most people.
Yeah, Hicks was a guy. I got him in one league, I think, where in my main where I needed saves. I think I went to 63, which pains me to even say because I think there's so many different ways that it can not be there, right? It could be Gallegos, it could be other situations, but I think I have 14 saves in that league, so it's just I'm in a little bit of a rough shape. But Hicks, I mean, if you look at him, if you look at his metrics over the last little bit, like we know the velocity's there, but this year has actually been in the last 15 games or so, like his swinging strike rate has been pretty elevated. The Ks have been there. The walks are always there. You're just hoping that it's a combination of ground balls and strikeouts that can kind of get him out of it. So it's still a little concerning, but the Cardinals, they have good defense behind him. They play in a good stadium. And so hoping that either, I'm hoping he, actually, I don't know how I feel because I've got the Helsley in the OC, but one of them has it. I've got Gallegos in another one of my leagues. So it's just however it works out, I guess I'll be happy in one spot. But he's looked pretty good. And from a skills perspective, I'm usually not in on him, but I think he's looked much better recently. Foley, I had him kind of lower down on some bid lists. He does not strike out a lot of guys. He gives up a lot of contact, but he does give up a lot of ground balls. And so I think he's kind of fine. And he could get it and run with it. And he could be one of those guys where you bid the $8 instead of the 63 for Hicks. And you end up being like, oh yeah, guess what? I won that one. So can definitely see that there. And who was the third one? Sorry.
Well, first on Hicks, the thing with Hicks is it's always been weird because we always see him throw, 120 or whatever the hell he throws. Everything is gas, but the strikeouts have never really come along with it. It's always been weird. Like maybe it's just the sequencing, or he tries to just get guys to hit the ball, whatever. He hits a ton of ground balls too. It's like he gets a lot of ground balls, but the strikeouts are there right now. He's a 35% strikeout rate in 29 innings, whereas he was, his career high was 28%. He was 22% in 2021, only a few innings, but last year he was 24%. So it's never been there. You take those and you take the walks, it just doesn't work. But if he can get to 35%, and you mentioned he's been better lately, his last 2 outings, 3 strikeouts in each one, no walks in those. He's the one guy here that you could kind of squint and see him just take over this job. It seems like, Gallegos and Helsley were kind of back and forth. And I really like Helsley as a pitcher. Has not been as good as he was last year. But I think that they like Gallegos, but I don't know how much they trust him in the 9th inning. Like, I feel like if Hicks pitched well for 2 weeks, it could kind of line up where those other 2 guys set up and Hicks could take the job. Whereas I don't see that with a lot of the guys we pick up recently. I kind of think Hicks has a chance to get this job. I don't know if it'll happen. The other guys are still good, but I feel like Hicks has the stuff. And if the strikeouts are there, maybe we finally see him take over the role, especially a team that is so bad. Like maybe just give him a chance to see what he's got. And, they're in the Central. They're 14 games out of 500, so they're really bad, but they're still only 8.5 back. Like, it's not dead yet, although they're playing like it's dead. And, Arenado had some quotes this week that he thinks their team is pretty dead, but I don't know. I didn't
see those, Ed.
He's pretty much like, we're playing terribly. This is horrible. Like, we're just bad. Like, it was just like him coming to the terms of the fact that we're just bad and not just playing bad. We are bad right now. But it's June 18th. We've seen the last couple of years. It was the Braves were bad for, a couple of years ago and won the World Series. The Phillies were bad early and then went to the World Series last year. But I don't know. I feel like Hicks has a chance to be a difference maker. It probably won't happen. The odds are not high it does, but I think there's enough of a chance there that if he's a difference maker, he could really be one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm still bitter about Nolan Arenado, being lazy on that ground ball and Miles Mikolas' start 2 or 3 weeks ago, where he gave up 3 runs afterwards. So, yeah.
Miles Mikolas, king of the one strikeout outing.
God,
Miles he was available in one of my main events. I'm like, yeah, I heard he's been better lately. And I looked and I'm like, 1 or 2 strikeouts. I think I put in a small bid, but I was like, Yeah, Scott McGuff was the other guy that I added that I was talking about in there. And he was more of a 12-team play this week, but it seems like, he kind of was in the committee to start the year, struggled a little bit. Castro pitched better for a while, but now McGuff's been better for the last month. It seems like he's the right-handed piece of that committee right now, and he's been pitching pretty well the last 5 or 6 weeks.
Yeah, I love McGuff. I have
nice.
McGuff in a bunch of different places. Just to be fair, he does have a 169 BABIP. So that is he is not going to maintain that, but he gave up one of the things that I love. This is kind of strange, but like guys like him who give up a ton of runs at the beginning of the year, I almost feel like they've got regression on their side, where I'm like, okay, he gave up a bunch. So like he's due to be lucky, like moving forward here, but he's just been really good, like 14.4% swinging strike rate, 21% K- walk over the whole year, 37.5% O swing, which is great. The Z contact isn't fantastic at 84.3%, but it's still about league average, 76% strand rate. So that's fine. He's given up a bunch of home runs already as well. So I kind of like it. And I think he's really kind of been so solid now since the beginning of the season. Castro's not that good. Miguel Castro's not that good. Like you look at what he does, he walks too many guys. He doesn't strike out a lot. He's just going to get lucky. And I think what happened maybe there was, I don't know if you saw the game where Cody Clemens hit the
home run that was fouled.
That wasn't right.
Yep.
I think they saw that and they were like, you want to know something? Like, I don't know how comfortable we are like throwing him out there again. But I think McGuff has been kind of lights out for the last little bit. I haven't looked at his last 15. That's something that I like to do is just like look at the rolling average graphs and check out the last 15, not to put too much stock into it, but just to see kind of where their skills are at. Like, is their velo bumped up? Like, is there a reason why they've been improving? And when you look at him, he's got a 34.2% K rate and about the same O swing over his last 15 games. The in zone contact is nice at about 83%. He's still walking too many guys, but he's got that splitter. And it's a really good pitch and he goes to it a lot. And I think it helps him to limit contact and he works that, like high in the zone with that fastball. And just watching him pitch, he looks like a legit closer. And so I'm excited. I picked him up a couple weeks ago in a few leagues and then last week in one. And I think this week in one. So I'm really hoping he's good because that would help me a lot.
Yeah, especially in the league that you're high up on. I know you picked him up this week. I picked him up in the main event last week, so I'm kind of hoping for that too. A few news and notes before we get out of here. Henry Davis, and someone mentioned him in the chat, first overall pick in 2021, catcher for the Pirates. I got called up today, so he was not. Or we can call it tomorrow. He was not available in NFBC league, so we'll probably talk about him a bunch more next week. But so I'm kind of putting you in the spot here. I know you haven't prepped for it because he wasn't available in the leagues we play in. But he's a catcher. I mean, we talked about Bo Naylor earlier. He's obviously a huge pedigree guy, first overall pick, had 11 home runs across AA and AAA with an average about 285. A little bit of strikeouts, but not too bad. But hard hit rates 48% AAA. It's nice we get to watch the guy for a week, kind of see how the playing time's working out all in here. But how excited are you about Henry Davis maybe picking up next week?
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel bad for Endy Rodriguez, I think, is like the other catcher there who was like really good. And now he just got bypassed by the guy who just got brought up to AAA.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm interested. Actually, like it's hard. Honestly, like I'm very much projections driven when it comes to some of these rookies as they come up, and there isn't one. So I would rely on those prospect guys, but it looks like you mentioned, like there's a little bit of power, there's a little bit of speed there. I'll be interested to see how it translates into the big leagues.
Right, I imagine he has 9 stolen bases. You're right. That is a little bit of speed. Yeah,
for sure. Like it's one of those things where I think it would be ridiculous if they were bringing him up now and going to send him down pretty quickly, unless he was just absolutely awful, right? Like they're trying to get him seasoned. They're trying to get him ready so that he can be, kind of the guy for them for the foreseeable future. So I think that, he'd be interesting, but again, I'll be pretty skeptical about what that's going to be able to translate. I do like what you mentioned, that his K rate is relatively low, like high teens, low 20s, you add on that, whatever, 3-4% that you often see bump in the big leagues, and it's still not too bad. So it'll be interesting to see.
The problem is they got Austin Hedges there, and he is not. Austin Hedges not hit over $180 since 2018. Is that an amazing stat? I just looked at.
Probably been on my teams before though, too, right?
I know he's bad.
Like
176, 145, 178, 163, 175. That is an insane run of batting. I think you get lucky at some point and hit like a $190.
That dude must be good defensively. I mean,
yeah, right. Yeah, he actually is. You look at his like defensive WAR and all that; he's really good. But man, he's got a 1% barrel rate right now. That's some ugly stuff right there. But
I remember Austin Hedges from the San Diego days. What was that? That was probably like 7-8 years ago now.
Yeah, he was there from 2015 to 2019. It looks like he had an 18 home run year in there though. He had 214 with 18 bombs in 2017. So he's really good defensively, obviously. But that's really valuable at catcher. But man, it's going to hit $165. That's tough to stomach too much. Paul Sporer, our friend, just compared him to this era's Jeff Mathis, which is a great comp because we're always trying to get someone else to play catcher in Anaheim besides Jeff Mathis, and it just was always Jeff Mathis. Mike Scioscia loved Jeff Mathis. Couple real quick notes here for people. Tristan McKenzie back on the IL, right elbow strain. This one really sucks. He had just come back from the shoulder injury. Do you drop someone like this? You're going to hold off for more news? What do you do if you have Tristan McKenzie, say, in a 15 or a 12-teamer?
Yeah, I think I'm dropping at this point. I mean, it depends on what your options are, but it's one of those. I was really interested in getting McKenzie. He was actually dropped in my 12. And I tried to pick him up, and I missed out on it. I was really disappointed because he came back and he looked really good. But
he did.
When you have two arm related injuries, like kind of back to back in a season, it just becomes really hard. It's a really hard ramp up. And in a 12 where you have some places you can go for pitching, I would probably cut him.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're going to be just insanely cautious with him too. Like I know he's not like 20, but he's still 25, still like a young piece in their rotation. I just think that they're going to, coming off the shoulder, I just think they're going to be super safe with this. I think it's going to last way longer than you want to if you have him on a fancy team. Similar Edward Cabrera when the 15-day IL with right shoulder impingement. Seems like not long term. What do you do with someone like Cabrera? Do you obviously not as good as McKenzie, but has had some flashes. Do you hold someone like this in a 15-teamer?
Oh man, I was gonna say something like snide about how I didn't realize you'd actually roster him. But he's been good this year, huh?
Yeah.
No, he hasn't.
No, he's had flashes. He's got
flashes.
Inconsistent, although I felt like he was better lately. Although he's batting at Seattle this week, but he had gone about 5 straight starts with 3 runs allowed or fewer. I do have him in one league, and every time I'm like, I'm finally throwing him, he blows up on me, and then I'm like, I'm gonna bench him, and I'm gonna drop him, and then he throws a 6-inning shutout with 10 strikeouts against the A's. But the strikeouts have not been quite what I was hoping for. But I'm holding for a week, kind of seeing some news. I think the upside is real with him, but he's right on the edge. It might be a drop here
for sure. Yeah. I mean, it's just so challenging. Guys with walk rates like that, he's a 13% career walk rate, and it's one thing if you don't give up home runs, but he's got a 1.36 career home run rate, right? So it's just like you're looking at that and you're like, okay, so he's giving up a homer a game, and the chances of runners being on base with the whip that he's rolling out there, I just have a really difficult time with that. And I don't mean to be snide. It's really hard. There's plenty of terrible pitchers I have that I roll out there all the time, but it's just really challenging to throw that out there. And again, you're hoping that he becomes a different guy, or he gets lucky and this isn't his true talent level and he reaches some other peak. So the K's are great. 84 and 67. That's great.
I look at the 29% strikeout rate, and it always keeps me from dropping him. But man, the walk rate is brutal right now. Sean Murphy, I thought he was going IL for sure. He kind of pulled up out at first base after the right hamstring. Without going to be a strain, it's like it's just inflammation. No IL yet. Obviously, what do you do with someone like this? You're not gonna be able to start him early this week. You're probably not going to start him much this week. Do you pick another catcher? Do you just kind of roll him out there? I think in a 15-teamer, I'd probably just roll him out there. And if he goes IL, I'll worry about it next week. But it's a tough spot with a catcher because you just hate to use a bench spot on that.
Yeah, I did have this situation. I have him in my main, Murphy, and I picked up Jorge Alfaro.
Okay.
So I think I'll probably roll Alfaro out there the first half of the week. The zeros are really hard to take.
They are.
If you're Murphy and the max he's probably playing is 2 out of the first 3, and so one of those games being a good game, especially coming off an injury, I'd rather kind of roll out at least if I have a halfway decent option. I had Danny Jansen injured for a while in a number of leagues, and there were some where I just kind of took a 0. because there wasn't any good catchers available. But I feel like Alfaro, Yainer Diaz, Bo Naylor, those are examples of kind of catchers that I feel good about rolling out there.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I by the way, I think it'd be a miracle if Murphy plays 2 and 30 this week. I think he's going to miss the whole first half of this week. So I'd throw Alfaro out there. He's at Cincinnati. Is that right?
Yeah, he's at Cincy.
Yeah,
and then he's got the games in Coors.
Yeah, so that's a good piece. I mean, if you have a bench spot, I hate taking zeros too. That's a tough one. It just depends who's available and what your bench looks like. If you have a bunch of injured guys, it's hard to do it. But other than that, I think you kind of hit on all the other ones. Tanner Houck went on the 15-day IL. That you get the line drive in the face. It sounds like I wouldn't say he's okay, but like better than you would hope for. Getting no, it doesn't sound like any like serious head injury. It sounds like lacerations, but he is in the IL.
He actually they report he has a facial fracture.
Oh, does he now? Oh, I thought I had read he doesn't.
I saw that. Yeah, initially it was like contusions. And,
yeah. Oh, that sucks. Yeah, that was a scary one. I mean, they were up 13-1 in that game, and he was pitching well and kind of cruising. You hate to see those.
He's been looking really good too. He was on my radar as a guy to pick up. It was a bummer.
Yeah,
I mean, not for that reason. Obviously, it's a bummer, but like just like
Yeah, those are scary. Facial fractures, like you just that's who knows how long that takes. So that was a bummer there. We talked about Alex Cobb. We talked about Gene Segura. Last question I wanted to ask you, and this is kind of a one I'm dealing with. Brandon Lau could return for on-field work on Thursday. I don't know if you have him anywhere, but you hold him. I've held him in a 15-teamer. He's been bad. He's hitting 205, but like it's just a power bat that's there. And if he's on-field work on Thursday, maybe he's out another 2 weeks or so. I've held on to him. What do you do with someone like this who's kind of like not playing well, but then also hurt at the same time?
Yeah, I don't have him anywhere, but he was available in a couple leagues, and I put in like kind of $1 bids, kind of mid to low range on my things. And I think that's kind of how I would approach it. I think it's really contextual. Like if you have other second base and middle infield options that you can go to, if you're fine in power, then maybe you can go in a different direction. But as long as they're talking and they're talking positively, I think sometimes like it's such a fine line between cutting too soon and then also like realizing like everything seems so urgent right now, but we're not even halfway through the season. Like we still have, I don't even know what it is, probably 4/7 of the season to go. And having a player like of his caliber who's playing well for the last 3 months of the season, I mean, that could be 15 home runs, and that's meaningful. So I would hold on probably unless I had, options that I trusted or there was something on the wire that I felt like overall was going to be better than what he provides.
Yeah, I thought about it. It's a team that I just need power desperately. So like dropping him would just really hurt if he came back and played well. He's got a 12% barrel rate. He's got a 47.5% hard hit rate. Strikes out a ton, but he fixed that a little bit last year. Maybe he can kind of go back to that. So he's kind of one of those guys where maybe one setback and I drop him, but if he still keeps progressing, then I'm going to kind of go with it. But I think that's kind of all that I had. We kind of talked for a while here. I always like to get you on the podcast, so I apologize that we talked a little bit long, but it's always fun to have you. I'm
guilty. I'm guilty. I think for some of the reason why the podcast goes long. On there. So.
It was all good though. What do you want to let people know where they can find you? I know you're not doing your podcast weekly anymore, but I think you're still pretty active on Twitter talking baseball. Where can people find you on there? Where if somebody want to chat with Toby, where would they do that?
If somebody wanted to chat with me, I was just about to do. I don't know if you know the Coffee Talk skit from Saturday Night Live with Barbara Streisand. I was about to say,
is that Dana
Carvey? 555-4444. No, I at Batflip Crazy on Twitter is the best way to connect with me. I still post occasional GIFs of Eddie Rosario, the Fire Eagle, going off when he comes back from the dead. But definitely that's the best place to reach me. And just good luck to everybody. Appreciate you listening. Appreciate Scott, your inviting me on here. It's a fantastic podcast. I know it's like the one in the industry that everybody loves and really values a lot. And so appreciate you giving me the opportunity to join you again. It's fun to talk baseball.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you saying that. That's very nice. And especially someone that's as good at this as you are and a good player as you are, it really means a lot to hear you say that. So I appreciate you jumping on. I know I miss hearing you every week, but obviously there's a lot of stuff that goes on. So I do miss hearing you. So it's really good to catch up with you, hear your voice, chat some baseball. It's always really good. So if you want to follow Toby, he's at Batflip Crazy. I am at Scott Jenstad. He's a much better player than me this year. So, follow him rather than follow
Go
me
Reds.
Go Reds, our Reds. Jeff will be really bummed that he missed
America's
Reds
team.
hat. Yeah, it is. It really is right now. They're really fun. And when Christian Encarnacion, is it Strand or Stroud? I always mess it up.
I think it's Strand.
When he gets called up, we're gonna have all kinds of CES stuff going on there. So it's gonna be a lot of fun. They're about to get even more fun, which is pretty wild because they're a fun team right now. I think they've won 8 in a row or something like that. So our Reds are taking over. It's the summer of the Reds. I love it very much. So anyway, thanks everybody for listening. We do really appreciate that. If you could please rate or review the podcast, that always goes it goes a long way to helping us out. So we do appreciate that too. Other than that, I want to thank Toby again for coming on and giving us his time. Really good content as always. Jeff should be back next week. So we'll look forward to that too. Hope everybody has a really good week, a really good fantasy week, and hope you start moving up those standings as the summer starts going here. I hope everybody has a good week. Take care.